So far, Eisenhower has heard nothing from Moscow about the U-2. He doesn't care much for that phony cover story, but maybe it has worked. No news, however, is not good news. Francis Gary Powers is in Moscow at that moment under interrogation. Wednesday, May 4th. In Paris, work is underway preparing for the Four Powers Summit Conference on May 16th. In Washington, the early edition of the Washington Post carries a small front-page story on the missing plane. In the final edition, the story is dropped altogether. In Moscow, the cover story reaches Khrushchev. How sweet it is. All borscht and bologna. In his recorded memoirs, now kept at Columbia University, Khrushchev savors the moment.
We smiled with pleasure as we anticipated the discomfort which the spies who cooked up this false statement would feel when confronted with the evidence we already had in our pocket. I proposed the following plan. I would announce that the plane had been shot down, but, and this was important, I would not reveal that the pilot had been captured alive and was in our hands. Our intention here was to confuse the government circles of the United States.
So, crafty old Nikita Khrushchev had a propaganda plum that was too juicy to ignore. Later tonight, we'll recall what happened when he revealed that he had captured not only the spy plane, but the spy. But first, come back to some cover stories on a royal wedding and an execution.
Our world will continue with Cover Stories, May 1960.
Welcome back to May 1960. While politicians play with truth in Washington, a play about truth opens in New York. It's the night of May 3rd, before the curtain rises. A perfect time to be at the Sullivan Street Playhouse. The Fantastics, a musical about a boy, a girl, two fathers, and a wall. That's all. It's not a big play, this one, but it's important. Try to remember. I'll tell you why later. Or you could be up on Broadway, watching another play, a musical that oversimplifies truth, about a teenage idol who gets drafted. This one is a big play. And meanwhile, for the first time since he got out of the Army, the real teenage idol will be seen on TV and below the waist. That's okay now. There's not a whole lot of shaking going on anymore.
I'm gonna stick like glue. Stick because I'm stuck on you.
If the record raised a ruckus, it came from the crowd now and not the music. The music was milder, and even when it was well done, it was medium, but perfect for television. The party is May 12th. Frank Sinatra welcomes Elvis Presley to the middle of the road, where the money is.
Welcome home, Elvis. For my darling, I love you.
Man, that's pretty.
And I always will.
We love you, Conrad. Oh, yes, we do.
Conrad? If Elvis and rock and roll seemed bleached white on TV, the Broadway send-up of teenagers, their music, and their idol, who got drafted, Bye-Bye Birdie, was dripping with cute. Critics and grown-ups loved it.
Oh, one last kiss, oh, give me one last kiss. It never felt like this, no, never felt like this.
This was the first rock and roll musical comedy. The comedy part was there was no real rock and roll in the first rock and roll musical comedy. But there is a song about Ed Sullivan, and that's pretty funny.
We'll be coast to coast with our favorite host, Ed Sullivan.
Creator, producer, Edward Padula.
What we were trying to do was to spoof the adulation of our heroes, like Presley, the pinning of teenagers to each other, committing themselves to each other, which caused havoc in the families, and the use of the telephone.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, Helen. What's the story, Montgomery? What's the tale, Nightingale? Tell me quick about Hugo and Tim.
The grown-ups sing better. Dick Van Dyke as the wimpy bachelor. Paul Lynde as the wimpy father. Charles Nelson Riley, understudy to both wimps. Bad memory, good feet.
I remember the first couple of times I danced, the spotlights were up in the balcony. I looked up and I'm dancing and I thought, what am I doing here, trying to dance on Broadway? And the problem with, the taps were perfect. I didn't kick a teenager. I got such applause, but I couldn't remember the lyrics because I would be so panicked. You understand? I got the steps. And the lyrics would be, you know, instead of put on a happy face, I would say, put on a zabi, lift out a dollar's day. And you couldn't stop. And spread zabu, dabu day.
And spread sunshine all over the place. Just put on a happy face.
And they called it puppy love.
Not to their faces, I'll bet. She's almost 30. He's a commoner. She's a princess. Her sister is queen. Margaret Rose Windsor. Anthony Armstrong Jones. No, you don't call it puppy love. You call it good television. And television covers the wedding. Fully. For the first time. The royal family was used to being watched, but not on television. Peter Dimmock organized the coverage for the BBC.
The establishment thought that television was very much a peeping Tom, and therefore they would try and keep what I thought at the time were rather petty restrictions. And they said, under no circumstances could we look at them head-on when they were taking their vows.
I, Anthony Charles Robert.
I, Anthony Charles Robert.
Take thee, Margaret Rose.
Take thee, Margaret Rose.
Well, of course, that seems very silly and old-fashioned in this day and age.
La Princesse Margaret.
Television loves a costume party. Came early, stayed late, invited millions of its closest friends to come along and enjoy the reception live. Life always went to the party, but American TV stayed home, and this time the Brits brought the bundle. Royal Air Force Vulcan bombers hightailed it across the Atlantic, carrying videotape. A communication satellite could have beat them, but there weren't any. And this was complicated enough.
Takeoff will be at 1200 and 1300 hours approximately on Friday, May 6th.
The pictures were recorded at London Airport and then put onto the Vulcan bomber. Flown to Canada, where they landed. And then the pictures were immediately transmitted by CBC and picked up by the American network.
Okay, roll videotape.
The royal wedding transfixed the world for a day. One American had fascinated it for years.
Have you got any views on the Carol Chessman case?
For nearly 12 years, Carol Chessman had lived on death row in California's San Quentin prison, convicted of kidnapping with bodily harm during a series of rapes. He wrote 4 books in prison, while his execution was postponed 8 times. All the while, he maintained his innocence. His lawyer, Rosalie Asher.
He was, and it was apparent, highly intelligent. He was also highly volatile. At times, he could be very difficult to get along with, and he could be utterly charming as well. He was largely self-taught and exceedingly well-read.
Because Chessman was eloquent, because he had not killed anyone, because much of the world considered his execution barbaric, it provoked an international outrage, except in California, whose governor was Pat Brown. The U.S. Supreme Court had refused 17 times to review Chessman's conviction. The California Supreme Court could recommend clemency, but didn't. Brown did not have that power.
The court has twice been asked to make a recommendation for clemency and has twice refused. Under any reasonable concept of what is intended by the Constitution, I am now powerless.
If I had commuted a sentence from death to life, even with the permission of the Supreme Court, I think they would have recalled me. I think the feeling against Chessman was so strong. They felt that he was a vicious, bad rapist and that he should die. And the sympathy of so many people around the world had no effect upon it whatsoever.